They called the contract a marriage settlement. Ilara Vance knew it for what it was, the bill of sale for her own life. According to solicitor's notes from the Somerset County Archives, this transaction was legally binding, a desperate pact to save a ruined family from debtor's prison. But what the Duke didn't know was that the woman he'd purchased possessed a secret strength, one that would unravel his dark past and challenge his absolute control. Before we uncover the shocking confrontation in the Duke's private study, you need to understand the terror he commanded. It changed everything. The autumn of 1818 had been cruel to the Vance family. Her father's gambling debts had finally come due, a towering sum owed to the one man in all of Somerset who could not be reasoned with. Duke Alistair Beaumont, the beast of Blackwood Manor. You need to hear this, because it happened more often than history books admit. A family's fate was often sealed by one man's folly. Ilara stood in the cold, sparse parlor of her family home, the document laid out on the table between them. Her father couldn't meet her eyes. "He has agreed to forgive the entire debt," her father whispered, his voice hoarse, "in exchange for your hand." "In exchange for my life, you mean?" Ilara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She felt no anger, only a profound, hollowing emptiness. "I am to be sold. It is a prestigious match. He is a duke." "He is a monster," she corrected softly. "The whispers follow him from London to Bath. They say he was scarred in the fire that killed his first wife and child. They say he hasn't been seen in society for 5 years. They say the servants at Blackwood Manor are forbidden to speak in his presence unless spoken to." According to Dr. Alistair Finch, a social historian with a focus on the Regency aristocracy, men of Beaumont's station, especially those marked by tragedy, often retreated into a self-imposed exile, wielding their power and wealth as a shield. Their homes became fortresses not just of stone, but of silence and fear. This was the man she was being sold to. The contract, dated October 12, 1818, was a masterpiece of legal cruelty, binding her completely. It stated plainly that upon her marriage, all her assets, meager as they were, would become his property. Historical records from the period show that, under the law of coverture, a married woman had virtually no independent legal or financial identity. She was, for all intents and purposes, absorbed by her husband. Ilara later described the moment in a private journal. "I felt not like a bride, but like a ship being scuttled, deliberately sunk to settle a debt. My own will was the last thing to go under." Have you ever felt powerless against the decisions of others? It's a chilling, isolating feeling. The journey to Blackwood Manor was a descent into Gothic shadow. The estate, nestled deep in the rolling hills of Somerset, was a sprawling stone edifice that seemed to absorb the weak autumn light. Ancient oaks, bare and skeletal, lined a drive that wound on for miles. When the carriage finally stopped, a grim-faced butler, introduced as Mr. Davies, opened the door. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Your Grace," he intoned, his voice devoid of warmth. The Duke was not there to greet her. Instead, she was led through a grand entrance hall where suits of armor stood like silent sentinels and portraits of stern-faced ancestors watched from the walls. The air was cold, thick with the scent of beeswax, old stone, and something else: neglect. Pay attention to this detail. The house itself was a character in this story, a reflection of the man who ruled it. Her husband did not appear until dinner. He entered the cavernous dining hall just as the first course was being served, a phantom emerging from the gloom. The rumors had not lied. A web of faint scars traced one side of his face, pulling at the corner of his eye and mouth, giving him a permanent, unnerving scowl. He was tall, dressed in severe black, and moved with a predator's coiled grace. But it was his eyes that held the true terror, the color of a winter sky, and just as cold. "You are here," he stated. It was not a greeting. "As the contract stipulated," Ilara replied, her voice quiet but firm. She refused to let him see her fear. He sat at the far end of the impossibly long table, a king in his desolate court. "You will find your duties are minimal. You will manage the household staff. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, will assist you. You will not enter the West Wing. It is kept locked. You will be available to me when I require your presence. Is that understood?" "I understand the words," Ilara said, meeting his gaze. "But I am a woman, not a dog to be summoned. I will perform my duties as Duchess, but I will not be commanded like a servant." A dangerous silence fell. The footman behind her visibly flinched. The Duke's scarred mouth tightened. "You will learn your place, madam, or you will find this house a very cold prison indeed." He was testing her, she realized, expecting fear, demanding submission. It was a power game he had likely played and won his entire life. But what he didn't know was that Alara had spent years managing a crumbling estate, dealing with creditors, and holding her own family together with sheer force of will. Dignity isn't given, it's claimed. She simply picked up her fork. "The soup is getting cold, Your Grace." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of disbelief in their icy depths. He had expected hysterics or terrified obedience. He had not expected calm defiance. The real scandal was just beginning. By the end of this story, you'll discover 3 shocking truths that rock Blackwood Manor to its foundations. What we've just witnessed is the first hint of truth number 1. The Duke's beastly nature was a carefully constructed fortress, and Alara was the first person in years who refused to be intimidated by its walls. But wait, there's more to this. In the weeks that followed, Alara learned the rhythm of her new prison. The house was run with chilling efficiency by Mrs. Gable, a woman whose loyalty was to the Blackmore legacy, not its current master. The servants moved like ghosts, their fear of the Duke a palpable presence. Alistair, her husband, remained a distant, intimidating figure. He took his meals alone in his study and spent his days riding the estate or locked away in the forbidden West Wing. Alara refused to be idle. She requested the household ledgers. Mrs. Gable hesitated. "His Grace does not like others prying into estate business." "I am his wife, the Duchess of this estate. It is my business," Alara stated calmly. "The accounts, if you please." The official family ledger, preserved in the county archives, later revealed what Alara began to suspect. The estate, while vast, was bleeding money. According to the steward's investigation report conducted a year later, the estate's funds were being systematically siphoned off. But at the time, all Alara saw were discrepancies. Payments for goods never delivered, wages for workers who didn't exist. She began to explore. One rainy afternoon, she found a small, rusted key on a forgotten hook in the butler's pantry. A label, faded with age, read, "Orangery." She found the structure behind a walled garden, its glass panes clouded with grime, the interior choked with dead and dying plants. It was a place of forgotten beauty. For Alara, who had always found solace in botany, it was a sanctuary. We've all faced moments where doing the right thing meant risking everything. For Alara, restoring this greenhouse was an act of quiet rebellion. She began to work, clearing the dead foliage, cleaning the glass, tending to the few hardy plants that had survived. It was here, her hands in the soil, that she began to feel less like a prisoner and more like herself. The Duke discovered her there one evening. He stood in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the fading light. "I did not give you permission to be here." "I did not realize I required permission to appreciate what is beautiful on this estate," she replied without turning around. She was repotting a resilient tea rose. "This place has been closed for years. Then it is past time it was opened. Things die when they are left in the dark." The words hung in the air, a clear challenge. He watched her for a long moment, her focused, graceful movements, a stark contrast to the house's oppressive stillness. Then, without another word, he turned and left. What she didn't know was that the orangery had been his first wife's favorite place. This brings us to a crucial point. Remember that locked West Wing? One night, unable to sleep, Alara saw a faint light flickering from one of its windows. Her curiosity, a trait the Duke had yet to appreciate, got the better of her. She found a service staircase and followed it up to the forbidden wing. The door was unlocked. What she found inside would change everything. The West Wing wasn't a place of horror. It was a place of suspended grief. The rooms were preserved exactly as they had been 5 years ago. A child's room held toys on the floor, as if waiting for a small hand to return. In the master chamber, a woman's shawl was draped over a chair. On a small desk, Alara found a locket. Inside was a miniature portrait of a beautiful, smiling woman and a small, laughing boy. Isabel and Thomas. She heard a floorboard creak behind her. The Duke stood there, his face a mask of cold fury. "I told you never to come here." I saw a light," she stammered, holding up the locket. He snatched it from her hand. Get out! His voice was a low growl, more wounded than angry. Alistair, this is not a memorial. It is a tomb, she said softly. You have not just locked away this wing, you have locked away yourself. You know nothing, he roared, and for the first time, she saw the beast unleashed. He swept a vase from a table, and it shattered against the wall. You were bought to give me an heir, not to preach to me about my grief. The cruelty of his words struck her like a physical blow, but in that moment, seeing his raw, undisguised pain, she felt not fear, but a strange, aching pity. The quietest voices carry the truths people fear most. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She stood her ground and said, You are right. I don't know your pain, but I know that a man who builds a tomb for his family is in danger of being buried alive in it. She left him then, standing amidst the ghosts of his past. What she couldn't see was the way his shoulders slumped the moment she was gone, the way he sank into a chair, the sound of a single ragged sob breaking the 5 years of silence. Little did she know, someone else had been listening from the hallway. Immershers, Gable, whose expression was one of grim, calculating thought. If this story shocks you, hit like to help spread this untold story of resilience. We're about to reveal truth number 2, and it's even more explosive. Truth number 1 was that the Duke's cruelty was a mask for unbearable grief. Shocking, right? But truth number 2 will blow your mind. The estate wasn't just neglected, it was being actively sabotaged. After the confrontation in the West Wing, something shifted. The Duke remained distant, but the raw hostility was gone, replaced by a wary watchfulness. He did not forbid her from the orangery again. Meanwhile, Ilara's investigation into the estate ledgers deepened. She cross-referenced them with inventories from the head groundskeeper and the stable master. A pattern emerged. Mr. Finch, the estate steward, was a thief, according to Dr. Margaret Thornberry, historian and expert on Regency-era inheritance law with 30 years of research. Estate mismanagement was rampant. An emotionally absent landowner, particularly one consumed by grief like Duke Beaumont, was the perfect target for a trusted steward to embezzle funds over many years. It was often the arrival of a new, observant mistress of the house that brought such schemes to light. Ilara knew a direct accusation was dangerous. She needed undeniable proof, and Finch knew he was being watched. He saw the new Duchess not as his mistress, but as a threat to his comfortable, criminal enterprise. The high-stakes climax came on a bleak November afternoon. Finch requested an urgent meeting with the Duke in his study, insisting that Ilara and Mrs. Gable be present. The moment Ilara walked in, she knew it was a trap. Your Grace, Finch began, his voice slick with false concern. It is with the heaviest heart that I must bring a terrible matter to your attention. He placed a small cloth-wrapped bundle on the desk. For weeks I have noticed your health declining, your moods, your fatigue. He unwrapped the bundle to reveal a collection of herbs. Ilara recognized them instantly. Foxglove, nightshade, wolfsbane. They were from the most toxic corner of the orangery, plants she had been carefully isolating to be destroyed. These were found hidden in the Duchess's private gardening stores, Finch announced. Along with this, he produced a small vial of dark liquid. A tincture. She has been poisoning you in small doses, Your Grace, no doubt hoping to secure her position as a wealthy widow. The accusation was so audacious, so vile, that the room fell silent. Mrs. Gable gasped. The Duke stared at the herbs, then at Ilara, his face unreadable, the old suspicion clouding his eyes. This was the moment of truth. He was a man conditioned by loss and betrayal. For a gut-wrenching second, Ilara saw the flicker of doubt. He could believe it. What would you do in this situation? Falsely accused, with your life on the line? Ilara felt the blood drain from her face, but her voice when she spoke was ice. That is a lie. Is it? Finch pressed, sensing victory. Why else would you cultivate these poisons? You have been studying them. A servant saw you. This is where the seed Ilara had planted earlier came to fruition. Her knowledge was her only weapon. Yes, I was studying them, she said, stepping forward, because I was compiling a report on your gross incompetence, Mr. Finch. She turned to the Duke. Alistair, the herbs are real. I found them growing wild in the neglected gardens. I separated them because they are a danger to the livestock and the staff. She then turned her piercing gaze back to Finch. But the tincture is a fabrication, a clumsy one at that. Wolfsbane tincture is nearly black. This one is brown. It's likely just steeped bark and water. She wasn't finished. While you were busy planting false evidence, I was reviewing the ledgers you thought no one would ever check. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket. On September 3rd, you billed the estate for 10 new draft horses. The stable master confirms only 2 arrived. On October 15th, you paid for roof repairs on the east tenancy that were never performed. I have spoken to the tenant farmer myself. For the past 3 years, you have been stealing from this house, from the man who trusted you. Finch paled. Lies. She is trying to deflect. Then let us check your personal accounts, Ilara challenged. Let us summon the stable master and the tenant farmer. Let us test your poison. The truth has a way of revealing itself, Mr. Finch. Does it not? The Duke had been watching her, his expression shifting from suspicion to shock, and finally to a dawning, terrible understanding. He looked from Finch's panicked face to Ilara's unwavering, righteous fury. He had seen her defy him, challenge him, and even pity him. But now he saw her defend him, defend his house, with a courage and intelligence he had never witnessed. He looked at Finch, and the full, terrifying power of the Duke of Blackwood returned, no longer clouded by grief, but sharpened by rage. Davies, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, lock this man in the cellar. Send for the magistrate. Finch collapsed, pleading, but it was too late. He had underestimated the woman the Duke had bought. He had not realized she was the one person her husband could not command, but also the one person he would finally choose to trust. The public payoff was swift. Finch was tried and imprisoned. Estate documents from the following year show a complete overhaul of management practices, instituting policies of financial transparency and responsible governance. But the immediate aftermath wasn't a fairy tale. That night, after Finch was gone, Alistair found Ilara in the library. The accusation, even though disproven, hung between them. You doubted me, she said. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. For a moment, he admitted, his voice raw with shame. The thought of being betrayed again. It is a poison of its own. Can you forgive me? Forgiveness is not the issue, Alistair. Trust is. You and I were bound by a contract, but a partnership must be built on something more. This was the final hurdle. It was not enough to defeat the villain. They had to defeat the ghost between them. He walked over to the fireplace and threw the locket, Isabel's locket, into the flames. Ilara gasped. I will not live in a tomb any longer, he said, turning to her, his eyes clear for the first time. She is a memory to be honored, not a ghost to haunt us. You, Ilara, are my wife, my duchess, my partner, if you will have me. This brings us to truth, the 3, the most important one of all. It wasn't Ilara's beauty or obedience that tamed the beast. It was her refusal to be broken. It was her integrity, her strength, her insistence on being seen as an equal. He could not command her, and in the end, he did not want to. He wanted to stand beside her. Their new beginning was not magical, but it was real. They worked together, side by side, to restore Blackwood Manor. They reopened the West Wing, not as a shrine, but as part of their home. The house slowly filled with light and eventually with laughter. They implemented changes that strengthened the entire community, focusing on heritage stewardship and ensuring safe community practices on their lands. They established a scholarship fund to promote youth literacy and supported local craftsmanship, rebuilding the community trust that had been broken. Their goal became a true philanthropic legacy, one focused on family wellness and sustainable stewardship. One evening, a year later, they stood in the fully restored orangery, fragrant with blooming roses. I was wrong, Alistair said quietly, taking her hand. I did not buy your life. I was given the chance to have one of my own. The contract that had begun as a bill of sale had become a testament to survival. The beast of Blackwood Manor had found not a possession, but a partner. And the woman who was sold to him had not found a prison, but a home she had built herself, with a man she had, against all odds, chosen to love. The soft mystery that remained was not what happened in the past, but the beautiful, uncharted future they would now build together.